So we're on to session 2. We're on to extremist use of emerging tech. There's plenty of examples of terrorist attacks over the years where they've used the most rudimentary of tools to cause great harm. But in this session, we're going to look at the most innovative of tools and how they're quickly adapting to that. They're obviously not immune to this form of technology. They're adapting very quickly and very easily. And to discuss this role, we have this illustrious panel right here. First up will be Dr. Scarlett Miller. She's an engineer from Penn State, originally from Omaha, upstream, who will discuss extended reality. Next up, we'll have Alexis D'Amato. She's an industrial organizational doctoral student, and Joel Elson, who teaches IT innovation and is an NCITE researcher. Austin Doctor, that old guy, you've seen him already. He's up for a sequel. Political scientist speaking on geospatial. And then Gary Ackerman is going to close us. And, you know, I should go on to say Gary from SUNY Albany has a lot to tell us, and I am just a horrible person because I'm only giving these people less than 10 minutes so we can get to your questions. So apologies to our panel. We could spend all day on this awesome topic. And with that, we're going to let Scarlett take it away and lead us off.
Thank you for the warm introduction. I already feel like I'm starting at a disadvantage because you gave out prizes, and I have to follow that. So happy to be here today. I'm Scarlett Miller. We talked about interdisciplinarity earlier, heard from political science, industrial and organizational psychologist. So I'm going to give you a lens through the view of engineering. So, my work is really largely in the space of virtual reality and how we can use it to augment trading capabilities, but I also have done a lot in the work of virtual reality as it comes to developing really innovative concepts. And so virtual reality is already largely being used throughout the counterterrorism world, specifically with training of counterterrorism police or looking at emerging threats in that space. But as we know, any good technology can also be used for malevolent uses. So while the metaverse offers a full potential, terrorists and extremists are also using it, and they're using it in a variety of ways. We heard a little bit about potential for recruitment earlier, coordination, identifying new targets, and today I'm going to talk to you about increased innovation. And so kind of the crux of my work originally came with collaborations with Dr. Sam Hunter when he was a Penn Stater, looking at the role of design fixation and the way people generate creative concepts. And so we kind of turned that concept on its head to start looking at the way they're using these technologies to cause harm. And so several years ago, going back about 5 years back, we came up with a task with Tin Nguyen and others that was looking at the role of fixation in a design context. And so we're Penn State fans. I already mentioned I was from Omaha. I graduated from Lincoln, so I'm a huge Nebraska football fan. But Penn State hates Ohio State, if you didn't know that. Big football rivalry. And so we had students generate concepts to prank the Woody Hayes statue, which is right outside of this beautiful glass building right across from the stadium. And so what we found from this was that people were able to kind of generate really creative concepts, malevolent concepts against these targets, and if we kind of remove the words like the Ohio State with the out group, the findings were quite significant. One of the things that we didn't look at in this world was we gave them this picture of the statue, but the reality is this statue is around a glass building. So a lot of the tasks and ideas they were coming up with were not necessarily useful or wouldn't be practically applied within these scenarios. So that led us to the question of, well, what happens if we can immerse ourselves in these environments, and what type of impact would that have? So that's where we set off with this research thread. And I tasked our Center for Immersive Experience to do was to help us build an environment of only publicly available data. And so they were able to recreate this world, the Ohio State Stadium world, using publicly available data from the Ohio Department of Administrative Services. So this is GIS data that is able to be downloaded and extrapolated. We were able to merge this data, LiDAR data, with Google Earth, OpenStreetMaps, and then YouTube recordings. This might be a technology we're all not familiar with, but many people are uploading YouTube videos all the time. One of the things we wanted for our simulation was we wanted a realistic view of the Woody Hayes statue, and there's no 3D model of that currently available. So my engineering student looked at data surrounding the Woody Hayes statue, was able to recreate that, put that into a 3D modeling software, import it into our 3D world, and have a realistic rendering of this model, true to scale, as if you were there. And so what we wanted to see from these environments that we created just from these 3D publicly available data sets is when people enter into these environments, how does it affect the malevolence of the creativity of the ideas that they developed? And so individuals are able to go up on top of roofs, move around the space. They're able to, we had different design examples they could utilize, but being in a 3D world, virtual world, is even better in some ways than being there in person because you're able to access areas that you wouldn't typically have access to. And so what we wanted to look at was, well, let's take this a step further, looking at emerging technology. There's a lot of free 3D software that you can download different models that have been openly developed. And so what if we're able to give them one of the common fixation points that we had earlier, which was a catapult, like catapult water balloons. And so we actually searched for different types of weapons or things on this open source Thingiverse website, and we're able to download models from it. Now I say open source because I just searched weapons really quickly on here, and this is what is available publicly for anyone to download, so you can just imagine it gets just darker from there. And so we were able to kind of look at the role of giving them a text-based example, a 2D example where they saw a picture or something, or actually being able to put our catapult design that was freely available anywhere in the world in this 3D environment to look at how the malevolence of their ideas were generated over time. And so we did a study with 30 different individuals. This is their first point viewpoint, looking around the environment, and then had to come up with additional ideas after the task. And what we found, the first finding was that there was no difference in fixation effects between groups. So whether they saw a 2D example versus interacted with it in 3 dimensions in that world, there was no difference in the types of ideas they generated. This is kind of contrary to some of the things that we see when we're operating in the real world, not the virtual world, but the thing that was most stark about it was that creativity increased after exposure to VR, regardless of what condition that they were in. So that means their ideas got more malevolent, and when I talk about creativity, that's both the quality of the idea, so likelihood that it would be successful, as well as the novelty of that idea as well. So when we started this project, I told you we pulled all of this data. I told my team use publicly available data. This was a year ago. And now here we are today in 2024. And new maps just introduced an immersive feature for routes and other AI features, which allows you to change the time of the day, the lighting, the weather conditions, all different aspects to be able to look at and see what the environment is like in these different contexts. And so we actually created these worlds and environments on our own using our team, but now this is already a technology that is existing. If we take it a level forward, I told you about the LiDAR and GIS data we pulled from Ohio. That data is what they're using to create these maps. So I say this as a world of caution, I guess, or an emerging thing to consider is we can create these worlds already. So if you don't have London, maybe it's a small town in rural Pennsylvania, that data exists. We can create these worlds, or they're already created for us, and it allows us to operate within these different conditions. So we focused on the lone wolf in this case, but we do have some data that we just finished. My student just submitted his master's thesis today, looking at simulated teams in these environments and the types of concepts that they also consider. So I'll leave it there, pass it on to my amazing colleague Joel, and then I think we're doing questions at the end. So thank you so much for your time.
All right, I think I'll remain seated. So what we're going to do here is I'm going to kick things off by talking about the malign use of current and near future AI. And I'm going to hand it off to one of our star Ph.D. students to talk about malevolent creativity and give an overview of one of our experiments. Let's see, where did the clicker go?
Oh, here it is.
Oh, there you go. Alrighty. So to start things off, we first need to just understand the field of AI. And that's just a branch of computer science which is focused on creating systems that are capable of doing tasks that were generally requiring human intelligence. And this touches on things like learning, problem solving, decision making, things like that. There's many, many different views on the future of AI, and we want to recognize those philosophical extremes. But as scientists, we're going to take this neutral ground, and we're going to speak to the malign use here. That being said, I just want to make a note that there are definitely a number of positive use cases that would definitely benefit the greater Homeland Security enterprise. So to start talking about extremist use of AI, I want to first do a little history repeat of the not so distant past. In November of 2022, OpenAI released ChatGPT. And now this was a significant unlock for the tech industry. It revolutionized natural language understanding, it enabled more intuitive human interfaces, and it accelerated innovation across the entire tech space. Since then, we've had large language models released by the likes of Google, Meta, and most recently, Apple. And I think if any of these companies' investment is any indication, they all believe in the potential of this technology. And that potential certainly has not gone unnoticed by extremists. So on January 9th of this year, Ronaldo Nazara, the founder of the Base, sent a message to the Instagram following, or the Telegram following, informing them that these systems had the potential to answer uncensored questions that had a criminal nature. There's other types of artificial intelligence tools that are being used as well. And so here we have an example of a pro-IS news flash that's using things like avatar generation, synthetic speech generation, and facial animation, which enables the connection of the two. The democratization of these tools means that anyone from anywhere with relatively little training will be able to produce this. And if you combine this with the previously discussed large language model technology, all you now have to do is say it, and it will come into existence. So what's kind of worth noting is that the attempts to discourage these tools from being used has largely been unsuccessful. Things like watermarking using steganography, which is putting little indicators within an image, can be easily circumvented simply by taking screenshots and then utilizing those images for whatever purpose they were intended for. So I want to acknowledge that there's a lot of really exciting future AI developments in the works, everything from open or advanced general intelligence, artificial intelligence, to things like synthetic data sets, and we'll have to table those for offline conversations. But today I want to focus on three things that are in the near future: edge AI, computer vision, and agents and autonomous systems. So talking about edge AI, what is that? And this is something that's really increasing in popularity. This is the deployment of AI models on local devices. And that's rather than on online servers that took entire data warehouses. These are on things as simple as a phone you might already have in your pocket. What's really, really critical about this is these are independent of the internet, and they're open sourced. And with individuals with just a little bit of training, they can actually use adapters to tailor these local models to gain high expertise in any subject area that they desire. So, of course, there's privacy gains to be had on the individuals that are using these edge deployments of AI. There's affordability. You don't need warehouses full of servers. And I think the customization aspect is really worth noting. Computer vision, right, is obviously another area focused on taking visual information in the world and allowing machines to understand that real-world information. It's an enabler of multimodal AI, and this is something that's already found in glasses like the ones I have on stage. This allows a machine or an AI model to understand the visual environment in front of a user, and then to whisper into the ear so no one else can hear whatever types of insights that model has to offer. Applications of computer vision range from deep fakes to object detection to autonomous systems. And then finally, I want to talk a little bit about AI, that it's accelerating robots and autonomous systems like AI agents. And these are computer systems capable of doing human-like tasks completely on their own without any human intervention. So these systems are going to offer enhanced capability for remotely interacting with the real world. In addition, they're going to offer digital interaction 24/7, allowing for engagement with content and online followers without any interaction. And to kind of talk about that future and some of the studies we've done and how it can be applied toward malevolent creativity, I'll turn it over to Alexis.
Okay, thank you, Joel. So Joel and his team really provide the technical expertise of AI, and then the psychologists on the team are able to, with that technical expertise from Joel, apply it to creativity. So we set out to examine AI's role in the ideation and implementation of novel threats. And this was a two-part effort. The first was an integrative review of the literature to examine this intersection of AI, malevolent creativity, and extremism. And then the second part was a follow-up study to examine how AI is used in the malevolent creativity process. There's two things to note, though, before I begin. One, despite a debate in popular culture and in the research, we took the stance that AI will enhance creativity rather than replace it. So it'll act as a partner with the human user. And then second, I will interchangeably use creativity and malevolent creativity, but they're the same process, with the only distinguishing feature that malevolent creativity is built on the foundation of intentional harm. So creativity is the generation of novel and useful ideas. Malevolent creativity is the generation of novel and intentionally harmful ideas, but they're one and the same. So, as Joel outlined earlier, there are many examples of AI being used for malign implications. For example, the extremist social media network, The Gab, launched 100 chatbots ranging from Adolf Hitler to Ted Kaczynski, so users can interact with these individuals. And these AIs were trained on prompts such as, "You believe the Holocaust narrative is exaggerated and that 9/11 was an inside job." This AI also developed a 25-point plan for Aryan takeover in 2024, and one of the steps that it included was establish concentration camps for political prisoners and other undesirables. So this example just amplifies that AI is being used in the creative process in order to generate novel threats. So our first step in this effort was an integrative review of the literature. So we examined creativity, malevolent creativity, AI, and extremism literature. We used a modified version of the stage model of creativity, beginning with problem construction and ending with implementation planning. AI will enhance each of these phases. It's not solely used to generate novel threats. Instead, it can aid in information gathering, evaluating ideas, selecting those ideas, and then helping plan based on resources, expertise, and external barriers that go beyond the scope of what a single human or team can understand. So we have a few key takeaways from our first effort. First being that AI will continue to be used for extremist efforts and that it's going to improve the capabilities of these individuals and organizations. Second, because creativity is often a collaborative process, the human-AI partnership is going to be able to generate more novel and harmful ideas than a single human or team can alone. So this means that the biggest threat of AI is that ability to enhance the ideation and implementation of these novel and intentionally harmful ideas. So in addition to AI chatbots, AI avatars have also become a popular way to gather information or just simply communicate online. For example, the Ask Jesus on Twitch is a 24-hour stream, and users can ask this AI Jesus questions, and it's trained on scripture, so it'll answer from things from the Bible, with things from the Bible. And then other examples include just celebrities that people can ask questions or just engage in conversation. So due to that, we sought to investigate whether AI will enhance the generation of ideas that are original, of high quality, and harmful. So we placed participants into a hypothetical social revenge task, gave them an intergroup conflict problem statement, gave them an AI tool to gather information, and then asked them to create an attack as part of the idea generation process. We randomly assigned participants to either a chatbot, an AI avatar, or no avatar in the control condition, and then we coded their ideas for originality, quality, and harm, and then we coded the AI messages that they asked while gathering information for the steps in which they used the AI in the creative process, so information gathering, idea generation, or idea evaluation. Oh, and that's the avatar. So findings reveal group differences in harmful ideas, such that those who actually had no access to AI generated the most harmful ideas. Then there were also a series of interactions. So those who used the AI chatbot for information gathering generated more harmful and original ideas. Those who used the AI avatar for idea evaluation generated more harmful ideas. And then those who used the chatbot for idea generation, there were no significant findings or effects on the malevolent creativity variables. But further investigation, we found that if they used the AI chatbot for idea generation, their positive affect was stronger post the AI interaction. So what does all this mean? First, using AI to gather information and evaluate ideas did result in higher quality and more original ideas than a human could alone in the control condition. And although users enjoyed using the AI for generating ideas, there were no significant effects, so it's not solely going to be used for generating those novel ideas. And then the control condition had the most harmful ideas. However, that's one limitation of our study was that the AI was built upon a publicly accessible ChatGPT model, so it has lots of constraints. So in future research, maybe. Well, in future research, Joel and his team did create an unconstrained AI chatbot that participants will be able to gather information and generate ideas using something that doesn't have as many guardrails as something like ChatGPT. So we added a prompt from study 1 into the unconstrained, and it came up with an idea that included hurting and injuring people and then having others hit their head, which ChatGPT would have never included. So all this to say that these findings and tasks were part of a hypothetical intergroup conflict, but these findings do generalize and can be expanded upon in other contexts such as agroterrorism, public events, and other threats that are being spoken about during this conference. Thank you.
Okay, tech check. Great. Okay, good afternoon, everyone. For those of you not on or here during the first panel session, my name is Austin Doctor. I'm the NCITE head of counterterrorism research initiatives. I'm a political scientist by training. I study your usual suspects, militants, terrorists, violent extremists, and the emerging threats that they present, including through the malign use of emerging tech. I also promise that this is the last time you have to see me up here today. It is a privilege to be part of this panel with so many people that I respect and to speak on this important topic. I'm excited to share a bit about a project that I'm leading in partnership with a great team at START and UMD on the potential for terrorist use of geospatial technologies to harm and disrupt U.S. critical infrastructure. So let's get into it. Earlier this year, DHS released the 2024 Homeland Threat Assessment. Our project speaks to the intersection of two of the priorities identified in that report. That is the security of our nation's critical infrastructure and the evolving terrorism environment. And the background of this project goes a little bit further back than that as well. It's rooted in a number of the goals and supporting activities that are identified in the 2019 DHS strategic framework, including the need for accurate forecasting of threats and malign uses of emerging tech, and particularly in the form of future-oriented, public-ready reports. More recently, I think we've seen some pointed demand signals from statements released by DHS leaders, including those in CISA and across the interagency mission community, speaking directly to the types of geospatial tech that may present more immediate and downrange threats. That includes risk connected to the Internet of Things, unmanned systems, precision agriculture, explosives, and others. We know that U.S. critical infrastructure is in the crosshairs and across actors, or I should say by actors across the violent ideological spectrum. In this project, just by nature of feasibility, we focus on 2 of those 16 critical infrastructure sectors in particular. One, based off of the uptick in reported plots and attacks against the U.S. power grid, we want to give full attention to the U.S. energy sector. But we also want to look beyond the top of the news cycle. We think there's a lot of value in better understanding how these technologies may be used to disrupt the American food and ag sector. And so in anticipation of a changing threat environment, our goal for this project is to provide an update to that comprehensive understanding of how geospatial tech, advancements, and related skills could be used by malign actors in the future. The last time that this was done, at least by my count, in a public space was in a 2004 report published by the RAND Corporation. And I think we can all acknowledge that both the threat environment and the technological space has changed several times over since that time, and I think we're due for an update. I'll also mention, just by way of scope conditions, that we're focusing this iteration of the project on 3 specific suites of geospatial technologies, that is unmanned systems or drones, the Internet of Things, and geographic information systems. Okay, let's take a look under the hood. We're executing this project across 5 chronological tasks, and currently relatively early in the work plan under the second item of those 5, with 3 more on the horizon over the next year and a half or so. We've developed a set of 3 rapid review reports, and we are currently finalizing interviews with key subject matter experts and stakeholders. Next, we'll develop some scenario analysis frameworks and potential future-oriented malign use cases. All of that will culminate into a futures-oriented workshop that will bring together practitioners and stakeholders to act upon those designed scenarios and frameworks and identify both challenges and potential solutions to the identified issues. And we'll wrap this up, the project up, by bringing all of those insights together into a single report and deliverable for our partners at DHS and at CISA. Here's where we've accomplished so far, three rapid reviews that are nearing ready for public release. For those of you who have not worked with this methodology in the past, just by way of overview, this is an approach that's really designed to offer decision makers access to evidence summaries that map the evidence baseline, the state of science and practice on a given research topic. They're meant to serve as informative briefs that can prepare stakeholders for discussions and support the development of strategic frameworks. And so we've built these rapid reviews around those 3 suites of technologies that we've identified as a point of focus for this report. In terms of preliminary findings, what's come out of the work so far, what are we building from? First is just a recognition that critical infrastructure remains highly vulnerable to physical attack. Second, that violent extremists have more and latent opportunity, I think, to exploit publicly available geospatial data and enabled technologies to create harm and disruption. And we anticipate, our summary suggests this is likely only to increase in the near and intermediate future. The other thing I want to point out is that there isn't just one threat profile. Extremists are likely to make use of both more rudimentary forms of these technologies, as well as more sophisticated platforms and applications based off of their personal skills, knowledge, skills, abilities, and available resources. And I would expect these threat streams to present overlapping but also distinct risks. Lastly is just recognizing the need for a better understanding of what I would call the relative utility of terrorist adoption of geospatial tech relative to more analog or traditional TTPs. And this may tee up Gary's to talk as well. And so this is where we are in terms of our preliminary findings. We're excited to dig deeper and to build out from these across the rest of the project work plan, including in our next step, the development of these scenario analysis frameworks. Just as by way of summary, under this task, our purpose is to develop sort of an analytic focus on near future scenarios for terrorist use of geospatial tech that are really aligned and articulated around the planning and attack cycle. I have stolen borrowed this graphic from our friends at NCTC and the JCAT team specifically that outlines what some of those stages could look like. And we're looking to articulate these malign use cases around these different stages, using these to get a better understanding of how terrorists can use specific tech to conduct specific types of attacks against specific infrastructure targets. Actually, I think Scarlett's project that she briefed out and providing and presenting almost a digital twin of a physical environment and potential malign attacks in that space is a really good example of that. Could also think about unmanned systems being used for pre-attack intelligence and reconnaissance, and then an explosive-laden agriculture drone, right, being actually used to implement the attack against, say, an energy power substation. Critical aspects of these frameworks, though, I think, and the real value is going to be clarity about the constraining parameters around these malign use cases, as well as identification of the minimal threshold or barriers, points of entry at each of these stages of the attack cycle. What are the skills and resources needed for the typical violent extremists to execute a hypothetical use case? And then can we use these insights to help support proactive mitigation against identified viable threats? Look forward to digging more during Q&A and to learning from Gary's project. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Gary Ackerman. Thank you very much. I'm just going to stand here because the screen's a little bit this way and I can't really see it from where I am sitting. I just want to say thank you. It's really an honor and a privilege to be on a panel with all these wonderful researchers. And I think it's opportune that I am going last because a lot of what I do ties this all together. So now I don't have to make the case that there are emerging technologies that we need to be concerned about. That has really been made very adequately. These talks are much easier to give if you've done sort of a standard research project with hypothesis, testing, and findings. Unfortunately, the research project that we've been doing, the ATTACH project, which I'm not going to go out the whole acronym. The ATTACH project is much more of giving a capability to DHS and the Homeland Security enterprise. It's a lot about kind of the weeds and the products that come out of it. So hopefully I'm going to talk a little bit about that today. I have far more slides than I have time. And the last thing I want to do is get on Erin's bad side. So some of the stuff I'm just going to go over very broadly, sort of what we've done, where we are and where we're going, and then I'm happy to sort of go into more detail afterwards. If anything here sort of whets your appetite, come speak to me afterwards or during the question and answer session. So with that, I'm just going to go ahead. I also want to thank very much, I have a whole team, a wonderful team who are working on this at the University of Albany, and I also have several other folks. But I also want to specifically recognize our current partners at DHS. We've had partners in the CWMD office and also currently in the Office of Intelligence and Analysis, who have been wonderful partners, and we could not do this work without their impact, their input. And especially since we're designing a product for them, it's crucial to have that kind of feedback loop. And they've been exceptionally gracious with their time and their expertise, and so I wanted to acknowledge that as well. Okay, project overview. I think there's some slides missing here, but whatever, it's all good. There's a few slides missing. I don't need to, that case has already been made for me about the problems to solve. How we're going to do it, we're looking at horizon scanning, which is a methodology to kind of look at the universe of what's out there and see what could possibly be a risk or a threat. Why do we do that? Because you've got all these risk assessment and threat assessment methodologies, but you have to have something to apply those to. And if you don't even know that something's a potential threat, you're not going to analyze the magnitude of that threat or risk, and therefore you can't do anything about it. So somebody has to identify it first, and that's kind of what horizon scanning does. And then after that, we bring on a socio-technical model of terrorist technology adoption to analyze which of these technologies are most likely to be used by adversaries. In the first year, we focused on CBRN, chemical, biological, radiological, and nuclear technologies. And the year two focus, which is this year, we're focusing on autonomous technology. So many of the things that have been mentioned now, we've actually, this was all kind of, very validating for what we've been doing. Products are, we're actually creating horizon scans, which by themselves are very useful for people in the enterprise. We're also developing a new model of terrorist technology adoption that's specifically oriented towards the homeland, building on other work I've done in the past, but taking into account the unique features of domestic threat environment. Things like you don't have necessarily very well-structured formal groups like Hezbollah and Al-Qaeda necessarily are being the only actors. You also have a lot of lone actors or semi-lone actors or whatever you want to call them, quasi-lone actors. You have small cells. You have unnamed entities that don't come out there and say, this is our ideological platform. So how do we had to adapt the model for that. And then we've done a lot of pilot testing of the tool. Okay, so without further ado, that is a long and probably tedious, boring way that we actually do have a process. I'm not going to go too much into it, but we basically do the horizon scan first. We get a lot of feedback during a while. We do data collection. We populate the tool. We run the tool. But I'm skipping out that for that now. Whoops. Now we go dead. Okay, there we go. So the whole idea of horizon scans, I've done, that's the sort of objective that we have. We only looked offensively, so horizon scans can be done for defensive technologies, and they should be done for defensive technologies, but we're focusing on how these technologies might be abused and misused and utilized by non-state actors. Only technologies and developments reported in the last 5 years. You know, we're not interested in technologies from 30 years ago. Looking for weak signals. So we do all kinds of cool stuff. So as well as going through patent databases and scientific journal articles and engineering magazines, we also go through YouTube and Reddit and science fiction books. And my students love when I tell them that your mission and task for the semester is to read as many comic books as possible and extract any useful ideas about new technologies. And they were like, wait, I'm actually getting paid to do this? And I said, yeah. Okay, except we don't pay you because you're an intern, but anyway. Okay, so horizon scans, again, we're just looking for plausibility. We're not saying that something is a threat. We're saying that in some non-zero probability of potentially being a threat within the next 5 years' time or 10 years' time. Everything subsequent to that gets done at a different process of threat assessment, risk assessment. As I said, we looked at both mainstream and fringe sources. We also interviewed a lot of experts. So there's a very rigorous process, but no time for that now. Just as an example, though, we did over 800 sources were identified that we extracted 604 signals. Signals are kind of weak and strong things that you need to worry about, plus expert interviews, and then you come up with a lot of clustering, analysis, and synthesis, and you come up with what we call insights. Insights are the so what of a lot of different signals. So you get all kinds of different signals of things that are happening, and you put them all together and say, okay, what does this mean for Homeland Security? And those are the 57 insights. And that's just one insight there as an example of electromagnetically activated chemical weapons or biological weapons. That's a very interesting one, but we have like 56 others, but I can talk about it. And you get these small sheets, and then you can put all that together and bring it into a technological landscape. We call this a landscape where everything is kind of looked at what's a black swan versus what's definitely happening versus in what area of threat is there. Does this apply? Is it going to have a high impact or low impact in Homeland Security? These are the kind of things you can ask. You can put it all in one infographic. By the way, this website, there's an interactive website where you can go here and click and see everything. If anyone's interested, ask me. And then you can also do some, what is the overall, picture, and you can do some quick analyses. How many black swans versus trends are there and things like that. Okay, I'm going to go very quickly through this. In the year 2, though, we're looking at autonomous technologies. That will be delivered to NCITE next week, so I have a whole lot of people working on it now. And we're looking at everything like drone swarms, AI systems, autonomous vehicles used as weapons. We've got some fascinating things that we found, but you'll find about next week. Now we're talking about the model. The model integrates the technical aspects of emerging technologies and the social organizational strategic features of malicious actors like terrorists. And it focuses on a combination of terrorist technology dyads. So we don't believe you can look at the technologies themselves. We don't believe you can look at the terrorists themselves. You have to look at the interaction between them at an organizational, social, technological level. Just to give an example, it has two submodels within it, a decision submodel, whether or not the terrorists are actually are going to be interested in pursuing that technology, and then a success submodel. If they pursue it, how likely are they to succeed? And they're very different kind of models. Innovations that we did in the last year, we updated the theoretical foundation based on the latest social science. So we read another 500 sources on all these things. The model has changed fundamentally from a deterministic model to a probabilistic model. Those you know, we moved from known terrorist groups only, which the model could only handle those in the past, to now can look at lone actors, cells, and archetypes, and we brought in a lot of interaction effects that weren't in the previous versions of the model. So I'm not going to go too much into that, but we can look at incel stops and that. Those are some of the variables in the model. It's a large model. It's a complex model. I'm not going to go into much, but you can see those are just some of the technology and active variables, but they go on. I'm not going to, this is just to show you that I've actually done something for those at DHS, and I'm not just saying this, there's actually something there, but I'm not going to go too much into it. It could be vaporware, who knows, but that's how at the moment, the model is implemented, at least the input and output interface is implemented in Excel, because that's something that's easy for our folks in DHS to do. So they enter information, analysts enter information about the actor, information about the technology, can be different actors, and then the model runs all kinds of cool things, and he has a technology input sample of things that they can do. It's drop-down menus and very simple stuff. The model actually does calculations and then comes up with, it uses a Monte Carlo simulation approach to combine all of these different effects and variables and get you something where it is. So why do we care about that? And I know I only have a minute left, so I have to tell you very quickly why we care about that. We did a pilot application just to verify that this all worked and we could run it in a feasible amount of time. We looked at 5 very different actors in the US. We looked at some lone actors, some small cells, and some more or less formal organizations. And then we looked at 5 pilot technologies that were, funny enough, drawn from our Horizon scan. We took 5 of them. We worked with DHS to choose 5. Obviously, you could run all of the actors against all the technologies. This tool is completely scalable, but this was just a pilot. You can see the pilot technologies. And then you can do things like look at which different actors and which technology showed the most likelihood. And short answer there is Hezbollah was the most likely to both pursue things, an operational cell of Hezbollah in the US, and to succeed. And accelerationists differed from, depending on the actor, but we can go more into that. It was just a pilot. We didn't use like any classified data. It was used based purely on open source data, but it could include non-open source data too. Applications, it mitigates both over and under reaction to emerging technology threats. It moves from assessing theoretical potential of emerging technologies, which is something that everybody's talking about, but what's the real world terrorist threat against the homeland from those technologies? Because there's just too many emerging technologies to deal with everything. The eventual tool will be easily updated and be able to rerun with new data, technologies, and adversaries. It kind of builds libraries and just add to those as you go, and provides stakeholders with sustainable capability, something that they can use on and on. So where are we doing now? The current tool is lab use only. There's a lot of things that are still done manually and that you need kind of like very big familiarity with the tool and not designed for usability or homeland security workflows. So we're developing a user-friendly interfaces and operational processes with INA, very closely with them, to maximize usage by analysts and stakeholders. And we've worked with a lot of analysts. If I send them one more usability survey and functionality survey and make them go through the same thing one more time, I think they're going to kill me or arrest me or something. But we will have a fully functioning prototype by the fall of this year that can then be hopefully transitioned over to the community. So thank you very much. That's all. Happy to answer questions, and thank you for your patience.
Gary, you could never get on my bad side, by the way. I'm a sucker for an accent. You know, this is where all the telemarketing companies are based in Omaha, because we sadly don't have an accent. Okay, so hopefully we got a lot of questions here, and Gary has, and everyone has so much to offer, so please do use this time to chase them down and talk to them. It's sort of tragic that we had to have him rush through that presentation, but I'm thankful to you, Gary, because we do want to get to questions. Okay, we've got Camden back there. Go ahead.
Oh, all right. Hi, my name is Nate Ostick. I'm from the University of Nebraska, Omaha, and this is really could be directed to any of you. I'm curious, how do these emerging technologies that you're focusing on intersect with decentralized communication and also financial technologies, and what sort of capabilities are they enabling these bad actors to have? And how might that be combated as well?
Anyone want to take that one? Okay, Gary, thank you.
Those who know me know that I'll talk anytime, so just tell me to shut up when you've had enough. That's a very interesting question. Communications technologies and financial, I'm presuming things like cryptocurrencies and encrypted communications and things like that. It's actually this whole idea of threat convergence. Because there are multiple technologies emerging in multiple streams at the same time, that doesn't mean you can analyze them separately, because they do cross over. Even though Ghostbusters tell you never cross the streams, in reality they do. Sorry, I'll get a lot of pop culture references to the 80s in. They'll tell you to, they do, because there are ripple effects. So for instance, if you're doing something using AI, and then there comes the time to pay for it, you pay for it with cryptocurrency, which you can then disguise in a way. So it actually, a lot of these things are actually, we actually see this happening. We see certain things happening, people trying to buy new technologies on the dark web, for instance, but paying in cryptocurrency and then communicating through Proton Mail or whatever you want to do. So those things are happening. At the moment, most of it is happening with criminal organizations rather than terrorists, so to speak, but usually terrorists are one step behind the criminal organizations. So what the criminal organizations do today, I've found like in 10 years' time, the terrorists will be doing. Hope that answers a little bit of the question.
Thank you, Gary, and good job. That was succinct. Kevin Peters has a question here, Camden.
Appreciate it. Kevin Peters, Department of Homeland Security, Office of Intelligence Analysis. First off, Austin, thank you so much for having a picture of the Homeland Threat Assessment. It's great to know at least one person read that. Bringing back to a question my colleague from NCTC asked the first panel this morning, and to kind of set up the question, I want to kind of pivot to that engagement opportunity for policymakers to confront malicious use of technologies. And for kind of a tee up, you have the artificial intelligence community, groups like the Future of Life Institute that advocate for ethical AI research principles. They help sign on great things, Yosemite principles. But then that runs into industry, who's looking for any possible way they can use AI to use it for novel applications to make money. And it presents a lot of real challenges for policymakers when you're looking at how do you confront an industry that overlaps. I think it was a great way you guys described the convergence of geospatial technologies, which is multiple technologies. You're kind of categorizing that way, or autonomous technologies, as Gary, you talked about. So I'd love a two-part question. Thoughts from the panel. What opportunities, in terms of for policymakers to engage, and which industries do you think are doing the best to try to develop mitigations as they're developing their technologies, and which industries are the worst? Kind of help us think about that from a policymaker perspective of how we really confront this challenge. And just today, the Supreme Court strikes down an injunction to us engaging with tech sector, which has been a real challenge in the last several years. So hopefully that makes sense. Happy to clarify offline, but appreciate the view of the panel on that tough challenge for policymakers.
I see heads nodding. Austin, jump in from a policy perspective.
Yeah, sure. And I think, in terms of the AI, I'll leave the AI side to Joel and to his team. But on the first question, what opportunities are there for policy actors to engage? I think really, really critical one. The first is, I would say, find the early opportunity, right? Earlier on in the development process. I mean, because there's going to be a natural further and further down, and I think this is known to everybody in the room, but the further you are through the R&D and sort of process, the more that profitability is at risk, right? So you're at a competing interest from the start. So I think finding that opportunity to step in as a partner to not just completely shut down, right, but to actually be a partner and trying to find a way to develop things that are ethical, but also preemptively avoid or mitigate malign use cases at scale is I think the best way forward. And the way to do that, to get in early on, is to have teams working on identifying those over-the-horizon emerging threats, right? And then determining which are the most viable, right? And the most likely to happen, so that you can sort your workflow and prioritize accordingly. Yeah.
So that's a great question. And fortunately, unfortunately, I've been heavily involved with industry in assessing new technologies, primarily AI, but other technologies as well recently. So I kind of have an insight. I can't give details because the NDAs will put me in. My kids will never go to college then, but because a lot of these companies have more lawyers than DHS has employees. But I'll tell you two things. First of all, there's an interesting thing. A colleague the other day is starting to write a paper of mine. He's entitling his paper "When the U.S. Government Nationalizes AI," which is a very provocative title. But he's actually looking and says like he believes honestly this could happen. So it might get to the point where crazy stuff happens. But put that aside, I find in these organizations, just like any government agency and anything else, there are different factions. You've got the designers and developers, engineers often, who just want to build new things, don't think about anything. You do have people that are honestly worried about the implications, security, safety, social implications. And you know, they've been given a sort of a little bit of energy now, and they've been sometimes given budgets to say we need to, you know, mitigate any potential harm that comes from our technologies. But then at the same time, while they're being given that, there's also the shareholders are saying we need profit. And so there's the business folks in the organization are pushing and saying, yep, we've given you 2 days to do a safety testing, now we're rolling out the product. When they were like, we need 6 years to do the safety testing. And then on top of that, you have all the lawyers that say, you're not working with government, I don't care, you're not talking to anybody in government ever for any reason, you know, you're not saying anything. So you have all these different factions, and it depends on any one day. So it's been very frustrating sometimes for me is that on one day, the safety and security faction kind of wins out and makes the case that we need to make sure our products and our technologies are safe and secure. And then the next day, they're like, oh, by the way, you know, we're going to do all that testing. Yeah, that's been canned because they need to move this out to market within a week. So, I mean, it's a very dynamic thing, but there is that constituency. So my advice is always, whatever the US government can do to strengthen that constituency within all these organizations, that's what I do. And there are senior people, leadership in a lot of these organizations that are serious about this. It's just that there's multiple competing interests as well.
Joel, do you want to piggyback off that at all?
I think that was pretty well answered. I think that in terms of good examples and bad examples, it might be a little more nuanced than that, because I feel within every organization that we're talking to and that we're working with, you know, you have your EACs and your D-cells, people for and against, you know, rapidly implementing this technology. So we'll answer it across the board.
Very good, thank you. Scarlett, I have a question for you. I wrote this down early when you were speaking. You mentioned that VR leads to more malevolent creativity. Why?
That's a good question. So why? I always say in design, the most important question is why. I think it's the ability to process the space in a way. So one, we're looking at product design, right? So in a broad spectrum, we're looking at an ability to develop a product in a space that can cause harm, as Alexis brought up, right? So I think once you understand the environment more and the capabilities of where you're at and the scenarios, it allows you to envision new ways. So in one of the photos I showed, there was actually a van that was backed up in a Google Earth photo of it. And so I may never have thought about a delivery vehicle being a means to put a product in that could then cause harm, but being able to contextualize that space and be able to see it is a way that can then trigger different memory spaces in my mind to make me think of new novel threats. So I think it's the access of the way that our mind works that it then triggers these new areas of information that we may not have thought of before.
Okay, and then related, Alexis, I wonder if you can weigh in. So we don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater, right? We don't want to go back to the Stone Age and just use fire, which Omahans had to do last night when the lights went out due to the storm. So that said, what is it about emerging tech that leads to bad behavior? Is this always thus? So every time there was a new technological development, there was malign application of that, or is there something unique to the tech that we're seeing now that lends to more malign use than other tech?
I think both can be true. There's a long history of, the internet being used for malign applications, so I think just the newest and greatest technology that's being developed is also going to be adopted. I think artificial intelligence and some of the other emerging technologies offer maybe a new type of creativity and thinking and novelty that wasn't previously available in the world of Web 2.0 and the development of that in the 90s. So I think yes, to your answer. Yeah.
Does anyone else want to weigh in on that? I'm just curious, what is new about the tech that's different from the old tech?
So this question goes back, much further than human beings themselves. They found recently that chimpanzees use sticks. They use sticks for poking in termite mounds to get termites. They also then go and use those sticks to hit other chimpanzees. So they're taking the good and bad part of that technology, and that's about as basic as you can get. And throughout history, this has occurred. Leonardo da Vinci and Francis Bacon both encrypted a lot of their work because they knew that if they didn't, people would misuse it. So there's a lot of things. There's nothing new about this. There's a whole good thing on some anthropologists have done a lot of work where they say about malevolent creativity. They didn't call it that, but this goes back hundreds of years. It's something that's a continual cycle, and anything new can be, there are those who will use it for good and those who will use it for bad. Although it's important to recognize that even those who we say are using it for malevolent purposes, in their minds they're not. In their minds they're doing something noble. So almost all terrorists throughout the world always believe that they are right and they are correct and justified in what they're doing. So it's only malevolent from our perspective. From their perspective, it's very useful, just like we think things are useful.
So in the stick example, is it what was malevolent? Was it the termites? Were they? No, we don't need to go down that road. Listen, we're going to take a break, folks, and ask you to come back. Before you do, let's give this panel a round of applause.